Okay, welcome friends to our roundtable conversation on feminism. And today I'm here with Brett. I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. And we have had many conversations privately about what feminism is and what it isn't, and specifically what it is and what it isn't to us, what's been helpful in my life and your life and businesses. And I asked you if you would have a conversation with me publicly, because I think that this information and this perspective is not something that a lot of folks are presented with. And having an alternative perspective on feminism and a more feminist approach to life and business has been really transformational for me. So I'm excited for us to have this conversation here today and for folks to be able to listen. So Brett, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Cortell. I am a health and wellness coach and also the mother of 3 very active little boys. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think for anyone in the, I don't like the word influencer, but let's say in the space where potentially you influence others, whether it's one person, hundreds, thousands, I do think we have a responsibility to, as women, to think about this topic and really explore what it means to us, both in the context of the past and the present.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, that term influencer, maybe our conversation will also take a turn to the influencer world, since that's something else we've talked about. But
yeah,
most people have influence of some sort. And I know a lot of people in my audience, I can't necessarily speak to your audience, but are coaches, are teachers, are mothers, are in positions where, again, like you said, it doesn't matter if you influence one person or you have influence over 100,000 people. We are in these positions of influence. And this concept is one that is important, especially for folks that identify as women. But I would also argue to say that it's important for everyone. Mm-hmm. It's important for everyone to understand what feminine power is and what masculine power is. There's a place for both in all of us, in our lives, in our businesses, in society. And I think what we've seen over the last many, like, society, for modern society, is the masculine, the rise of the masculine. And like the feminine has been rising, but something we're going to talk about here today is how in some ways, feminist movements or movements that are quote unquote empower women are actually not as empowering as they might seem. And they're actually just asking women to put on a man's energy, a man's role,
right.
which can be good. What?
Or they've been created by men.
Or they've been created by men. Totally.
And our marketing schemes, really.
And they're benefiting men.
Yeah.
And like, that's fine if that's your jam and if that feels more natural to you. But I know for me, and this is how I got interested in feminism and actually understanding the more feminine side of myself, applying that to business, is that I did the masculine way, which from a very high level perspective, like masculine is more linear. It's more, this is what I want. This is how I go after it and achieve it. This is my vision. I'm going to execute it. There's like one way that works. And I did that and it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me in going through the corporate world. And also it didn't work for me when I applied that mentality to my wellness business.
Yep. And so much of that.
Yeah. So I think like we can talk specifics, but like that's what got me in and starting to question, like, is there another way? Is there an easier way? Does this have to be so hard? Do I have to like hustle so much because something inside of me says this isn't for me?
Right.
What got you interested in this conversation?
I think, I think the thing that really triggered it was a podcast called Be There in Five, which is a really interesting one. It's more kind of like a commentary driven podcast by a woman who's a journalist, very articulate, and it happened to be about Rachel Hollis, but it wasn't a takedown. It wasn't, a smear campaign. It actually was a very thoughtful kind of dissection of the rise of Rachel Hollis. And I will not say the fall, because she's still extremely popular despite a lot of problematic behavior. But she really talks about it a lot in the lens of feminism. And she says a lot in there that was kind of like a light bulb moment for me. Emily, I'm like you. I was raised with a very black and white kind of viewpoint, very masculine mindset, masculine programming, entered the corporate world despite the fact that, I actually hated what I was doing, but, and it didn't resonate. And I've just recently, I'd say in the past few years, because I too tried to apply that to wellness, and it had a variety of results, none of which have been spectacular. And, so I've been rethinking a lot too. And that podcast and some of our conversations really have gotten me thinking a lot about, I would say also the pandemic, about a new way of thinking. For me, one of my big things coming out of 2020, the pandemic is still here, so I really should say 2020 and lockdown, was changing some of my paradigms, changing some of the ways I thought about things, and realizing that things aren't just black and white all the time.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to being a woman and recognizing how much programming that we don't even realize we've been subjected to. So I would say the podcast was the trigger, but it was kind of germinating throughout this past year.
It was under the surface, and that like really brought it up. And I agree. We'll link the podcast. We'll probably talk about it a little bit more here today, but we'll link it in case anyone's interested. I agree with Brett. There's a lot of cancel culture going on right now, especially in the wellness and personal development worlds. And I don't love that. I know there's a place for accountability. But this podcast is not that. It is very thoughtful, and it's interesting, especially for folks who are in or adjacent to wellness, personal growth, personal development, spirituality industries, because it points out a lot of problematic things within these industries, that not to say, like, not to be black or white, that okay, everyone who's an Instagram coach is bad. Everyone who labels themselves as an influencer is bad. Everyone who wants to make a certain amount of money or grow an empire is bad. No, that's not the point. But there is a shadow side of this industry that if you're somebody, I'm somebody who's in it, who's been in it, and who will continue to be in it, I think it's my responsibility to educate myself and make sure that I'm staying aware of the darker side, not necessarily living there, but being aware of it.
Yes.
And just for folks who maybe this isn't clear to, one of like something that was interesting to me as I studied more about the divine feminine, and how to lean into my own feminine energy, is our current, like from my understanding, and granted, I did not study this in school or anything more than was required, but my understanding of like the feminist movement is equal rights for women. women can vote, women can work, women can make equal pay. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti any of those things. I think that's all great. But the problem is that we are not equal per se. There are inherent differences, and not acknowledging that and not respecting that and acknowledging the beauty. There's like a beauty in the masculine energy, and there's a different beauty in the feminine energy. And so what the feminist movement has done in a lot of ways is like equal for women, so that women can be equal to men, but we're not. And I think that putting all this pressure on then women to show up in the workplace at a certain level, like you said, like be in a corporate job, do it a certain way, while there's also like a pressure. I mean, I think the reality is that for the most part, and you can correct me from your understanding of this, for the most part, it's often falls on the woman too, a lot of childcare, a lot of taking care of elders. And so, yeah, that's what's been interesting to me, is just to acknowledge that, like, this is what this movement has been pointing to, of like, give women everything that men get. But we actually need something slightly different. We actually operate in a different way. And being able to uplift that will not only help women, it will also help men. And I think we'll say this, I mean, throughout the whole conversation, when we refer to women and men, it's not like everybody has that within. We have all both energies within us, and we all fall on different sides, under different place in the spectrum. So these are like archetypes that we are talking about, not every single female person and every single male person, because you might be a male who leans more on the feminine side.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And I think part of, an even deeper way to think about this, in the past, feminism, yes, it has been associated equal rights, equal pay, which is great. Started the conversation, got us somewhere. But this has been something that I've just been thinking about so much and bothers me profoundly, is what happened during the pandemic and how many women have dropped out of the workforce. And women are in a crisis right now. Like, this is a big, big problem. I was just listening to, something about a story about a woman who's, works full time, and her husband works full time, and she basically had to do everything. She was, has a very good job, but was just inherently expected to shoulder everything for the past year. And, like, what is it that's leading to these expectations? And, feminism got us to a certain point, but I think the pandemic exposed some very serious fault lines. And those fault lines now are, well, how do we dive deeper? Because, if it was just as simple as equal pay, equal rights, then this wouldn't have happened. And I think another thing to mention here too is that Emily and I are both very much on the side of intersectional feminism, which means, we're not just thinking about women, we're thinking about all women. We're thinking about women of color. We're thinking about everyone. We're not just thinking about white privileged women, because that's another piece of this. We're not all equal. Some of us have privileges that others don't, and everybody needs to be included in the conversation.
And I think that's like, this is not like necessarily the conversation or completely like the same, but it's connected. I remember last year, with the Black Lives Matter movement coming more to the forefront around this time last year, even more to the forefront. Wow. There was a huge conversation around, it's not just about equality, like, especially for these groups of marginalized folks, that like, you have to actually lift them up higher. It's about equity. Yes. And it's not exactly the same, because it's just not. But I think that's a good, if anybody has heard that or seen the little diagram, have you seen this diagram where it's the three people staring over a fence?
No.
And they're on three different levels? I'll find it and link it because it talks about equality, equity, and maybe inclusion, but that's not, I don't think that's correct, but I'll find it. We'll put it in like the notes or just send it to you because it's a good visual of this. Again, this is not just about giving everyone the same thing. It's making sure that we're all elevated to a place where we can be in the game.
Yes,
really.
Exactly. And as you said, that benefits both the men and women.
Yeah. Just like fighting against racism benefits all people, not just marginalized groups.
Yep.
So where do we want to go from here? I think like let's introduce or dive into like the girl boss culture.
Yes. Okay.
This has been something that has come up. I saw it come up a lot, like at the end of last year, the rise and fall of the girl boss. But what was your experience? Like for anyone who isn't really familiar or maybe isn't really familiar with this term, like what is your experience of girl boss culture? Or what does that mean to you?
I think girl boss several years ago really resonated with me.
Same. Thank you for saying that because and now it's like all of a sudden I feel like it became this bad thing. And I think folks might be like, oh, wait a second, what happened? So it resonated with you.
It did. And I was part of an MLM several years ago. I joined right after the birth of not right after, but maybe a year and a half after the birth of my third son. And I think it kind of coincided with that. And I found both really empowering. The MLM was owned by a man, still is. And I think that, first of all, we're allowed to evolve and we're allowed to change. I don't think I'm all for female empowerment. And I think it's that feeling of empowerment that so much of us want. The thing that I've subsequently realized that's problematic with girl boss is that it's inherently a masculine, it just feels very masculine to me now. And it feels kind of like this mentality of pushing through no matter what. And you've got to just work. Like, don't, you're tired, who cares? Like, you've got to work, this is the way I was raised. It was like, only people that work hard will succeed. It doesn't matter. Your feelings don't really matter. If you're tired, those kind of people aren't going to succeed.
Drink more coffee.
Drink more coffee.
Put on your big boy pants.
Right. Put on your big boy pants. And so there's that side of the girl boss thing. Then there's also the me. Girl boss. Okay. If you want to be a boss, that means you want to sort of be the number one or, managing over a group of people. And it's kind of like, but is that really, and if that is what you want, then great. But like, let's say I was leading an organization. I don't know that I would want to be referred to as a boss.
Well, and that's an inherently, like you said, I don't think we realize this because now we're told we want more women at the C level, which I agree. We want more women managers. Yes, I agree, but it can't be done the masculine way where it's person on top. Like I'm in charge, I'm in control.
I'm the boss of you. Like,
naturally women like to be more, naturally men are more loners. This is a generalization and it's not always true, but they're more like independent, do it themselves. Think of like a hunter or a warrior.
Right.
Women traditionally, evolutionary, have done better in groups. And I see that in myself too. Like I would rather be working with folks and be helping versus like getting a badge that says like, you're the best.
Yes.
You know?
I'd rather be like a leader of a collective or a mentor, somebody who's bringing everybody else up and empowering versus a boss telling people what to do. Right. And that's inherently, I think, the problem I have now thinking about it, because it's not just, saying you're a boss doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to be empowered.
Yeah. And I just want to also pull out what you said with that, because my experience, I was very fortunate that when I left the corporate world, I worked with somebody who was a bit of a hustler, but also not, like very much honored making things easy and going with the flow and following intuition. But honestly, living in New York City, it was really, really hard to truly live that, because cost of living is so high, because everyone's hustling. I remember being like, and like a little tiny bit of that is good. Like a little tiny bit of like competition or fire under your butt is good, because it fires you up. But I just remember like it's just a constant go, go, go. What is the next thing that you're going to do? Who's the next person that you're going to meet? Like I would leave my apartment at some ungodly time in the morning to teach yoga or to go do something before then working a full day and then going to a networking thing at night or an event at night. And it was all lovely, but it was still so much. And now a year and a half later, I'm only really, it hasn't taken this whole time, but it honestly took me a year out of the city to truly decompress my nervous system and to accept that like there's value. And I think this is an important part of this conversation for me. There's value in other things besides my work. My work is so important to me. And right now I am a sole provider for myself. Like I don't have anyone else paying my bills. But there's so much value in making dinner for friends, spending time with my elderly grandmother, being able to help my parents with something. And I think that's like an inherently feminine thing. We want to care. Yeah, we want to caretake. We want to make spaces, make homes, make communities. And something that isn't necessarily valued by society.
That's right.
We're asked like, oh, well, just make money and then you'll pay someone to take care of it. And that's fine. Like if that's what you want to do, again, it's fine. But I've realized that I get a lot more joy out of my life when I have time to do those things for myself.
Yes.
Not as go, 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 next thing, hustle, hustle, hustle.
Yes. And I think, like that's, as you know, another thing I'm very fired up about lately is, and this is really, I was feeling it a little bit before the pandemic, but it really hit home in 2020, is kind of the end of this hustle culture mentality. And I don't know that it will be, I really do believe that we're entering a new age where people are going to start thinking about things differently. Do I think there's going to be a shift in my lifetime away from this? In America, probably not, but I can only hope that we move more toward the model of, Europe and basically everywhere else in the world, where they do take these other things that aren't necessarily directly tied to being a boss and accomplishing, seriously, leisure, travel, time with loved ones, the slow life, the slower things in life, because, that's really all we have in the end.
Totally. And I just hear this, and I don't think it's necessarily feminine versus masculine, but it is the very toxic side of toxic patriarchy, toxic feminism, is the focus on the individual. And I want to caveat, like anything, all of this is so nuanced, which is why I wanted to have a conversation versus like type out a report of like, or a blog post of like, this is what this is and this is what this means to me, because it's very nuanced. I am in full support of folks putting themselves first in their lives. I'm not like, I think another like shadow side of the feminine can be the martyr, which too many women fall under for a good portion of their lives, especially mothers and caretakers. But we see this, especially in the hustle culture. It's like you have to, and it's kind of tied back to like the quote unquote American dream, which I think is not making anyone happy or healthy. And it's this like obsessive individualism. Not, there is a positive side of individualism of like, I'm here, I have a key part to play in the universe, in my community, in my work structures, and I'm going to honor my intuition, my inner knowing, what I sense to be true above all else. That can play within community. I do believe when we follow that, we actually do support our communities, but there's almost like a toxic individualism or an extreme individualism where it's like, I have to take care of myself. I have to watch out for myself. I have to hustle so that I can like provide some security or safety or achievement for myself. So that what?
Right.
So that what? And I think that what I saw in the pandemic is like a real need for community.
Yes.
Like real connection and these community support systems, so that if something does happen to you as an individual, and that community can be your family, it can be your local community, your neighborhood, maybe it's even an online community, you have a net to fall into, because none of us are meant to do this life experience alone.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's interesting because now that things are opening back up and the mask mandate was just lowered for my state, I'm finding that it's the little things that mean so much to me now. Things like at my juice shop, seeing the woman who owns it, seeing her face for the first time in a year and a half, seeing her smile, you know, being able to hug my friends for the first time in a year and a half. It's actually, as much as I miss travel, it's not the excitement of knowing that I'm going to take a big trip next year. It's the little thing. It's these little things. And they all kind of come back to connection, like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one thing that kind of I'm feeling right now is that because things are opening back up, at least in the US, and people are going back to offices and more like back to certain schedules. I know your kids are like in sports and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And I am in a unique position, don't have kids, don't go to an office. Like, I feel like my world isn't changing, but I see people that I love and people that I work with getting pulled back into this hustle. And I don't know what to do. Like, I can't save them. I don't think I'm here to save anyone, but like, do you think this pandemic, this like break from so much of the like doing, the restaurants, the travel, the events, the this, the that, do you think that people have learned from that?
I think, unfortunately, most people probably have not.
Yeah.
That's the bad part. The good part, though, is that there's people like us to remind them. You know, there's people like us to remind them. And I have to believe that like we're doing, you know, there's a reason why we're doing this. And I do just think it's so systemic in our culture to hustle and value the material. And, I am glad that our economy did not sink into like a depression. It looks like there may be a boom now, in fact, which unfortunately I think is going to be, like, again, I don't need to be in a depression, but I think it is going to cause a lot of people to just, and I think it's already happening. A lot of people are just swinging the other way and kind of like going crazy now.
Yeah.
But I think, it's something that I'm trying to really be mindful about in my own life and record and write down so that, I can share it with others, because I really am determined not to fall back in some of the same patterns. My husband, his office reopened and he's not planning on, he never was in the office every single day. And I think he'll still be working at home here and there. But that's that's actually a conversation we had, because he went back, and I've been joking about how I kind of can't wait to have the house to myself and whatnot. But it was really kind of sad when he was gone. And I told him, I was like, I really don't know if it's acceptable for me to like go back to you leaving at 7 a.m. and coming home at 9 at night. I was like, I don't think we can go back to that.
And I'm glad you say that, because even as I think that too, like, I know that there is no going back. There is no going back ever. Like, that's not how evolution works. That's not how consciousness evolves. And I have to say that I have heard a lot of talk around folks who've learned a lot on how they can work, how they can be more effective, what they're not willing to accept from their own employers, their own boundaries, their spouses, what have you. And so I do feel like we are in this moment right now at the time of this recording where it is like almost like if you go on a diet and then you like stop your diet and you can have sugar once again, you're like, oh, the sugar. But then you realize like that doesn't actually make you feel good. And you find a more balanced place. So I think that we will find like a new level of balance. But it will be interesting to see how that unfolds for the greater society.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this is a bigger conversation, but, a trigger for me is the fact that this is like probably a social media roundtable you could do. But, like the Kardashians of the world, like, have they missed a beat? No. And their toxic messaging? Absolutely not. And are they influencing a generation of young women and men? Yes, they are. They still are. And I don't think they got the memo at all. And they have a huge platform, and there's, especially for women, it's just so problematic. And things like that make me sad.
Let's talk about some of the things that we see that are like you said, the Kardashians. I'd love to hear. I don't really keep up with pop culture, and also recently totally left social media, not social media, but Instagram. So I feel a little disconnected, but I would love to hear, and I have some of my own thoughts on this. Like, what are things that maybe we've been taught or shown are like empowering or beautiful or feminine that actually are not? And what maybe are some things that we could consider instead? So what have you seen in the Kardashians?
Well, I think, it's just the fact that they have, I think people forget that they're a business, and they're going to protect that business, and they're a brand, right? So they're going to protect it at all costs. Part of the brands that they have built is this new body type that's very, very in vogue now, right? And body type, when I was growing up, it was Kate Moss, like looked like a toothpick. Now it's like the waist that's this big and like a big booty and, an impossibly wide hips. And there's no question that they've all had surgery, most likely a lot of surgeries. Their bodies don't look like that normally, but they never talk about it. they act like they do 2 workouts a day and that's how it happens. And they have, created this type.
Do people really think, I'd love to hear like comment on this. Like when I see them, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, they've had tons of work.
Yeah.
And this is not in like a judgy way, because also
Yeah.
all bodies, like I believe there's so many different shapes of female bodies and male bodies, but the female body is like, I think way more varied. And yeah, anyways, so plastic surgery.
Yeah, I mean, listen, plastic surgery, it is what it is. Like, I'm not going to judge people that have plastic surgery, especially those in the public eye. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, everyone in Hollywood and in the public eye has had it.
Yeah.
Even if they like violently say they have it, they all have. It's just part of what you have to do, especially, as a woman. My issue is just that they've built a brand on it. And they sort of, they act like it's just natural or just a result of working out, or like they sell a skinny tea. Kylie Jenner was in a picture recently where she literally like airbrushed out her vagina so that she looked like a Barbie. So now young girls are going to look at that and be like, oh, an essential part of my body is wrong. Like,
wait, you're going to have to send me that.
I'll send it to you. Yeah. She looks like basically her whole body looks like a Barbie. And it's very clearly, photoshopped, but, so it's just, I think, so like, how do we overcome, and again, this is like programming. I'm sorry, but like, this comes from the patriarchy and it comes from
totally, no, it totally
culture.
does.
Like, this is what they want, right? Yeah. All the like seductive posing, on Instagram and whatnot. Like, I guess if that makes you feel good, great. But like, does it, it's like, are they doing that I don't know that they're doing it for themselves. I think they're doing it to mask like a very deep insecurity. And so it comes back to, I think, being okay with ourselves.
I agree.
We are enough. Like, as a woman, I think we have to trust that we are enough, which is hard for so many women, myself included. Like,
Yeah. And it's also tough when, like, I am all for like, you go on and do whatever's going to make you feel your best. Yeah. I truly do not know what it's like to be inside anyone else's body, anyone else's brain. And if getting a nose job makes you feel great, great. But I think the problem is we are like, at this point, most young women and middle-aged women have grown up inside, and even older women, like at this point, grown up inside a soup of, this is what is good. This is what is beautiful. This is what is gross. This is what is unacceptable. And it really takes, if you're questioning something, or even if you're not, like, I would invite you, like, take some time away from magazines and away from social media around, because we know social media, like, it is all airbrushed. Even if people are like real, there's a filter on it. The camera on your iPhone makes you look different. Cameras on Instagram stories make you look different.
Or they have lighting, like there's lighting. Oftentimes, if you're an influencer, like I have one right here, a very tiny elementary ring light, but most influencers have huge, it looks like a film studio behind them.
Yeah.
But you would think, oh, they're just naturally like that.
They're just naturally like that, naturally blemish free, naturally, like that's just how they take one photo. And so I would encourage folks to take a step away, because I think that and question your idea of beauty standards.
Yeah.
Something that is, that's interesting for me, and that I think about a lot, is like body hair. I grew up in like wax everything off, shave everything off. Like that's not feminine, but that's like a newer thing. And why are we doing this? Like, why, if it makes you feel beautiful, great. But is it just because you've been told that women don't have hairy legs or hairy armpits.
Yeah.
That is totally societal programming. And to take it a step further, like, who are the people that are benefiting from this industry? Who are the people that are benefiting from all of the beauty products that we need?
Yeah.
The razors and the wax and the this and the that and the, it's like, again, no shame if that makes you feel good, but like, if it like, question it, let yourself question it.
Like,
And something that came up.
Industry, go ahead.
What? No, go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, the diet industry now is like $1 trillion industry, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to see how many men are running those companies.
Yeah.
Telling us that we're not enough.
Or like, I know like, we've seen this come out many times where like someone's the head of Ben & Jerry's and they're like, I don't support this. Like, how many people at the head of diet industries or even like wellness pills or what have you are they deeply unhappy? Do they actually support this? And not to knock any business, because I'm sure there are tons of great businesses out there and products that do good. But I really think to be a human, a conscious consumer in this world that we're in requires you to take more time away from influence, whether that's media or social media or magazines or what have you, and to really think about like what's true to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about what's true to you, not, and I think just that exercise of even thinking about it, right? Like, for me, I didn't think about any of this, even like 5 years ago, I wasn't even thinking about this like layer of life. And it's been a really interesting exercise to think about it, and there's some things that I do and will continue to do that are part of programming, and it's okay because they're just things that I'm okay with and want to keep doing. And then there's other pieces of my behavior that I'm going to change. Again, like, I don't think to be a feminist, you don't have to like, you don't have to ascribe to this one stereotype that might be out there.
You don't have to burn your bras and have hairy armpits
and go like march down to DC immediately.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you want to, awesome.
If you want to, awesome. But like, I really think it's tapping into your own feminine power, which everyone has intuition, but that really is a feminine power of being able to step into your knowing and your feelings, and like being a little, like when we talk about like masculine and feminine, solar and lunar, the lunar is a little messy. It's a little dark, it can be a little like emotional and complex. And there's such beauty in that. And I think that as women, we need to embrace that more, because not only will that help us, raise daughters and sons, more connection to their emotions, it will also help when someone steps more into their feminine, it allows someone else to step more into their masculine, like the positive side of that. So I think that's also something that's interesting to talk about, is like the feeling side of things, because women especially, but I also know this applies to men as well, have been made to feel that, like, particularly with work, like feelings don't have a place.
Right.
Like, go cry in the I've cried in the bathroom I did cry in the bathroom so many times in my corporate job, but like, they don't, like, your feelings don't have a place. And not to say you should like cry in every board meeting, but like, your feelings are actually a superpower. They're part of you. A woman's intuition is powerful. And so if we can also, I filmed a video of, this was a while ago, for the women in my coaching group, Your Stellar Center, where I was just like crying. And it was not to be like, feel bad for me. It was to say, like, I feel a lot. I'm also like a triple Pisces. So Got all the feels over here.
Going.
But like I have learned, I was never really taught that that was acceptable, that that was like something that that was strong, like a strong, beautiful part of me. And so I filmed this video to show by example of like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel a lot. I feel a lot, but when I actually let myself feel it, there's like an insight or a release or a relief on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Versus like stuffing it all down and then it exploding somewhere else.
Yes. That's been for me, that's probably been one of the biggest lessons of my adult life is feeling feelings instead of being the martyr or, just stuffing them away. Because for me, like if I ignore my feelings or, try to stuff them down, there's always an explosion at varying levels of, drama.
Yeah.
And, my family doesn't benefit from that. They benefit from me, being open and honest and taking care of myself.
And also when you allow yourself to be vulnerable in like safe spaces, it lets other people come in and support you.
Yes.
Because women are really amazing and powerful and strong. And I think we've been taught to lean more into the strong, as in like, I have no flaws and I have no feelings.
Yeah.
I can do it all. I can be the mom. I can get the kids. I can do the food. I can also make this money and like, make sure that the in-laws get the birthday cards and all of this.
Yeah.
And like, I do like, we are good at doing a lot of things for the most part. But when you allow yourself to like be vulnerable, it lets everyone in your life, men and women, to support you. And that's like what a woman really wants is support.
Yes, I agree. And I think that, yeah, maybe we can, or we think we can do it all, but it comes at the cost of our mental health. And I don't think it's sustainable. It goes back to the thing of balance. Like, I don't believe in balance, honestly. I don't think there is a balance.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably a time when we're focusing more on one thing than another. But like perfect balance, I think doesn't really exist, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an interesting documentary. It is, I don't remember if it's on Netflix or Amazon or what. But if you Google like documentary matriarchy China, you'll find it.
Okay.
And it's a short documentary. We'll link it in the video. It's a short documentary on the last remaining matriarchy in the world that we like, that the modern world knows about. And it's really interesting because when you think of, at least I think not a few months, but like a year or two ago, if I thought of matriarchy, I would think of a patriarchy run by women, where women go to work and men mainly take care of children or the men do more things around the house, and women can run more businesses. Like that's what my brain would go to for matriarchy. But actually in this matriarchy, the women do a lot of it. I'm not necessarily saying that's correct, but the women run businesses. They take care of the kids to a certain age. The boys go off with the dads at some point. But what makes it all possible is the community. None of these women are doing things on their own. It's all, they're living with sisters, they're living with sister-in-laws, they're living with their mothers.
Yeah.
And property passes down through the women. So the women and her children are always safe in a house. I mean, with the exception of if there's like a war or something, but like for most of us, that's not a everyday reality. And so that was a really interesting documentary. It's just a short documentary to watch, to see, because I also, like, I want to have a beautiful business, and I also want to have a beautiful life and a beautiful family life and friends and community. And for a while it was like, well, do I have to give one up to have the other? And is it wrong of me to want all these things and dream about all these things? And that documentary just gave me a different perspective on what could be possible. Many people in yoga, wellness world, whatever world, say like we're entering more of a matriarchy, but like, what do we want that to look like? What do you want that to look like? So it doesn't have to look any certain way.
Right. And I think that's why it's so important to kind of start thinking of feminism and matriarchy as a way of the collective and supporting each other. And, you know, I believe that the word amplification, which was, you know, that first kind of came into my consciousness during the Black Lives Matter movement, but we're going to start hearing that, you know, hopefully about women, you know, amplification of women. You know, there's such simple ways to endorse the collective. Do you have a friend who is doing, you know, great things? Go ahead and give them a shout out on social media. Give them a call and let them know that they inspire you. You know, it's just these simple things that seem small, but they're not. Or if there's, you know, a colleague, instead of trying to compete, collaborate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that, at least for me, I feel like I struggled with female relationships a lot of my life. Like I was always like, I'm kind of more of I think we talked about this a little bit. Like I'm more of like a guy's girl. Like I don't like certain things. But I think it's because I didn't really have an example. I didn't really know what that could look like. And not saying this is anyone's fault, but like, I didn't know like what that would be. And so that's something that's been interesting as I am in my 30s, I think I'm really understanding the importance of female friendships and female community, and having that place where you can go if you need to fall apart, where you need to like share something that you are not sure about, but also where you can go, like where you can go and fuel someone else and lift someone else up, because you know that they'll do the same for you.
Yep, absolutely.
So that might be like a good takeaway for folks. And I don't mean here like share someone's Instagram post. That's kind of like, that is like a light version, but like truly do something that would support somebody else. Whether that is like offer to make a friend that just had a baby or has a young kid, or, you know, is going back to work and has a lot more going on, offer to make them dinner.
Yeah.
You know, ask someone how you can support them, decide to collaborate on something instead of just doing it yourself.
Yeah. I love that.
Another thing that's been super helpful for me, and this is something that came up in a group call recently and probably will come up in a future call, but has been helpful for me because I think this is also tied up with this feminist conversation, is like women and image and body image. We already talked about this a little bit with like the Kardashians and what we think body shapes look like, or our beauty standards. There's nothing wrong with appreciating beauty. In astrology, Venus is the planet connected to the feminine, and it is all about beauty. It's also all about partnership and aesthetics, and not because of the aesthetic, because of what it puts out into the world, but how it makes you feel. And I think that's an important thing, something that I've leaned into more recently as I've leaned more into my feminine, is getting dressed, learning how to do my hair, putting on makeup, not for anyone else, not because I'm like, oh shit, if someone sees me without makeup, they're going to think I'm ugly. but because it's fun, it's like a way to present myself and express myself. And so I think that's an interesting thing to play with too, because for many years I was like, oh, I don't need to do my hair, wear really minimal makeup, which again, if that's your deal, great. But also like, it could be fun to put on some blue eyeliner and red lipstick.
Yeah, I agree. I was just thinking about this yesterday because I realized over the course of the past year that I feel better when I get dressed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and by that I mean I get dressed every day, but like a lot of times I just am in my workout clothes, you know, and then I'll shower like later in the day. And I just feel better if I can get a workout in earlier and then put on like a big girl outfit because I spent the past year I would shower and getting dressed would mean putting on a new sweat set, you know, which is there's a real beauty in sweat sets. Don't get me wrong. I cherish every single set I own, but it does feel good sometimes to actually like do your, like, and that's for me, you know, to like dust off my jewelry and
jewelry is a huge thing. Yeah. Even if I don't
perfume, like for me, perfume always makes me feel really good.
Yeah. And there's not, so I think that like one of the, and I saw this in myself, which I kind of mentioned, is like the feminism, which might not fit for everyone, that like we kind of were presented is, yeah, like don't feel like you need to curl your hair or put on makeup or wear jewelry but like for me, I found that makes me feel good and I like it. And so if that's for you too, or maybe you want to just play with that, then there's definitely no shame.
Yeah. My dog Billy, who's female, wanted to join in the conversation as well.
Good. Good. Oh, and the last thing that I was going to say with this is also circling back to like the Kardashians and also how I said like about the body hair scenario, is if you're feeling like something like you have had toxic programming in you. For me, that was, I did this many years ago when I was like coming out of a pretty controlling relationship with food and exercise. I thought that a certain body type was what I needed to be, which was thin, which was fit, which was like not totally the Kate Moss, but like definitely very skinny. Like that was like it. And that's just not my natural body type, especially as I don't even want to say age, but like, especially as I age, like that's not who I am. And so I made a vision board with like images of people that I felt looked more like me. Mm-hmm. And some people, I remember my therapist years ago also said like, follow other people that look totally different than you. You can go out there and find like body positive influencers, or, you know, it might not even be like a size, but it might be a shape or a certain style. Like find and reprogram that in yourself. Something that is super interesting is if you go, now that things are opening up again, but you don't have to go in person, you can look online. But if you look at any ancient sculptures or statues, of like ancient Greece and Rome, you see women's bodies and they don't look like the models of today.
No.
They also don't really look like the Kardashians. No. And so
I don't know that anyone in history has looked like them. BBL, when was BBL invented?
A new
Brazilian butt lift, whenever that was invented.
Oh my gosh. But so that was really helpful to me to be like, oh, like this is what a woman's body can look like and it's okay.
Yeah.
And maybe see people more in real life and just be around folks in real life. Because again, the internet does weird things to our brain and everybody, whether they're trying to do it from a negative standpoint or it's just not even thought about. Like everyone filters their pictures, everyone puts their best face forward. And so if you can see people in real life in all of their beautiful flaws, especially women, like it's really empowering to be like, oh, I don't have to be this picture perfect image of whatever.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast called The Blonde Files. And it's this woman who's married to like a mega successful Hollywood writer. So she goes to a lot of like parties and things, like a lot of the award shows. And she always says that like the biggest actors and actresses, you know, she's like, because everyone's like, what are they, you know, what are they like in real life? And she's like, the craziest thing is that in real life, they look like normal people. Like they don't look the way they look online. Like they have flaws, they have bad skin, they, you know, aren't tall. You see the insecurity, you know, written all over their face. Like they're just normal people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, yeah, we are all human, no matter how big of a celebrity we've become or big of an influencer or how popular our show or our book or our coaching program has become. Like we are all flawed humans. Like that is part of the human experience. So I think it'll be interesting if we just circle back to the Rachel Hollis episode.
Yes. And one thing, my computer's running down because
the video.
my son likes to steal my laptop. So I can run down real quick and get a charger if you want.
Yeah, let's pause the recording.
Okay.
And we're back after our brief interruption.
Yes.
Brought to you by Power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to like circle back to that episode, and if there's anything else that you had like was a takeaway from that for you connected to this conversation, and what we've talked about like image and influencer culture and the girl boss. But yeah, if there's anything else that we want to like tie a bow around, or just like leave for the listeners to work with themselves.
I think for me, a big thing about that podcast and the Rachel Hollis stuff is that, you know, I mean, I was a big Rachel Hollis fan when she first kind of burst onto the scene a few years ago.
Okay.
And they talked in the podcast about how a lot of people in the South, first of all, basically every single of the most successful people in the self-help industry are men. And they, you know, maybe this is like a cynical way of looking at it, but I think it's important to look at this with a degree of skepticism. A lot of it's like a marketing strategy, and they're kind of going after insecurities and women's insecurities. And there's a pervasive message that if you're not succeeding, it's your fault.
Your fault. Yeah.
You're not trying hard enough. You're not working hard enough. You're not prioritizing it. You know, this, that, and the other thing, not taking into account socioeconomic factors, you know, taking into account none of that. And Rachel Hollis has said that she wants to be basically the Tony Robbins for women. And, you know, 5 years ago, there's a bunch of stuff about Tony Robbins that hadn't really come to light yet. There's a lot of sexual misconduct allegations out there now. And he literally uses a form of hypnotism. And he uses sensory deprivation. Rachel Hollis's father is a Pentecostal minister, right? So, you know, especially after she came out and basically said that her goal is to be at the top of the mountain, and that nothing she says matters because she owns us. I think that if anybody, you know, she's saying it's, you know, a lot of these people are saying, including Rachel Hollis, that it's your fault if you don't succeed. But at the same time, follow me, like I'm going to give you all the secrets to be happy and successful.
Yeah.
And I've kind of learned that if anyone tells you that they have all the secrets to life and how to be happy, run.
Turn the other way.
Turn the other way. You know, because the fact is they don't, but they're going to profit mightily if you think they do.
Yeah.
And it's sad. And I wish it wasn't like that, and part of this podcast was saying that like a lot of these people also know that you're never going to be able to achieve what they have, but they want you to keep believing that you can, so that you give them your money.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought this up. One, I did not ever really follow Rachel Hollis. Actually, the first time I had heard about her was last year when things were problematic, things were popping up.
Yeah.
And I remember like reading the title of her book and being like, huh? Girl, wash your face? Shut up, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah. Well, there was that tone from the beginning.
Well, but then hearing like about her beginnings and how she got to where she was, it's clear that like she definitely has helped people. But I agree with you in two things, and two things really stood out to me in listening to some of these episodes and understanding where her business comes from. And this connects to me and to this conversation deeply because one, it's about women's self-worth, and two, it's also about success, and especially in entrepreneurship. Nobody has the answers for you. You have the answers for you. And unfortunately, that is not as easy to sell. It's not as easy to sell. Well, I'm going to show you how to connect with yourself, or I'll show you one way. It's not as easy to be truthful about that.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to necessarily sell to the masses.
Yeah.
But that, yeah, it feels, there's another point, but it popped out of my head. So clearly it wasn't totally important, or it'll come back. But it was super interesting. Oh, the part about marketing. It was super interesting for me to hear some of the things that she's actually said in her conferences. That part about like, I own you. Her saying this to her audience.
I could sell you dirty socks.
I could sell you dirty socks. And sub point to that is like, I actually understand where some of her marketing tactics come from. And some of that is true. Some of it is true if you do have a very deep connection to your audience and they trust you.
This is influencer marketing.
This is influencer marketing, and it can be used, it can be positive. It can be certainly positive if there's someone that you trust that both provides business advice and also health advice. Like, you'll probably go to them before seeking someone, a stranger on the internet.
Yeah.
But taken to an extreme without any level of nuance or gray area, or I even want to say like feeling or emotion with it, that is incredibly problematic. Incredibly problematic. And so
complete lack of sensitivity to, all women.
Yeah.
Just, a complete lack of sensitivity basically to any of the issues that have come up over the past, say, 2 years. And also the work that as women, our ancestors have done to fight for our rights, like plagiarism is something that she's been plagued with for quite a while. She plagiarized my, Angelou, which is probably not so great person to plagiarize.
But it just shows that, like, coming back to this, like, if your eyes start to, and it's interesting because there's a card in the Kim Krantz's Wild Unknown archetype deck, the mountain card, which I remember listening to this part of the podcast where Rachel Hollis says she wants to be on the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
If you're just focused on the top of the mountain, you miss everything along the way. And you also, like, you're probably gonna mess up.
Yeah.
Like she has, because her only focus was on this success, this there, which is something I tell like a lot of anyone who will listen, like, there is no there. And also, if you're not enjoying the process along the way, what's the point of making 6 figures? What's the point of meeting your soulmate? What's the point of getting a body of your dreams if you're if you're totally losing yourself along the way. So
Yeah.
there's that. And the point of that card is like, yes, a mountain can be aspirational, but do not forget that the gems and the diamonds are in the mountain. They're all along the way. It's not just the vista at the top.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's super interesting, which I think, we won't go deep into today, but maybe there'll be a part 2 on this, on influencer culture and MLMs and all of that.
Yeah.
I too was part of an MLM, never really pushed it. I didn't realize how much Rachel Hollis's business actually built upon MLMs.
Yeah.
She herself is not part of one.
No, but I think
she markets.
Yeah.
She markets to people, and a lot of her advice for business is specifically for women in MLM structures.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with an MLM if you're using that to support your business. Unfortunately, I think there's that same myopic view of, let's sell this, let's get to this point. You can make a business without actually looking and being like, one, do I have any sort of credentials? And I'm not saying, we talked about this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody has to have
like
a bachelor degree in this and a doctorate in this and 10 certifications. That's all, can also be a problem in itself, feeling like you have to get certified in everything. But the trouble we see with companies like Beachbody or some of these others, of people calling themselves coaches that truly have no experience, no training in holding space for someone else's transformation, and only have experience in their self, which is useful, but isn't a business.
Yeah.
It isn't a business. So if you're just in the business of more business, that's a problem. That's a problem.
Right. And that was one of the, again, this is probably better for the next discussion, but that's an area where I got very disenchanted because I didn't know anything about MLMs when I started it. I just was doing it for my own reasons. And then I realized that the goal is to build a team and get residual income. And like, that's the goal. And then support your income supports who's above you. And that made,
in many ways it makes sense, but also in many ways it's problematic when you don't actually, in many ways it's problematic, because I always told people before they got into, I never did the MLM so much, and I was very fortunate to have an up level who wasn't very pressury. She was just chill like me. I never made any money, but I always tell people, if you want to make money in an MLM, you need to be in the business of the MLM. Yeah. You're not a coach who just has a side doTERRA business and it somehow brings you a couple $1,000s each month.
Yeah,
it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, no.
So that
was a lot of, I don't think that message is clear all the time. And I definitely was one of those naive people who I do things a lot of times based on my gut. And so I didn't, my bad. I like really didn't think it through. But yeah, that's a message I think that gets lost.
Yeah. So yeah, there were some problematic things that that podcast was interesting. I think this is my closing note. And I believe I mentioned this before, but for anybody who is in a personal growth industry or wellness industry, I think it is important to listen to that podcast, because there are so many things that I heard that, her name is Katie, right? The podcast host.
Yep.
Pointed out that were problematic little points in Rachel Hollis's progression, that any one of these things, when taken with care, with nuance, does not have to be weaponized, does not have to be used for bad. Like neuro-linguistic programming is used by that's what Tony Robbins teaches, is used by all major marketing industries. And you could use a little bit of it to support your business that actually helps people.
Yes.
But any of these things then, when focused to the extreme, can be problematic. So it's important for us as conscious folks in this industry to just be aware of where you might, what could be a dark hole to fall into.
And it's okay to want to help people. But at a certain point, you know, you have to know who you're helping, I think, and boundaries, right? Like when you may need to step aside and recommend a therapist or something like that.
Totally.
Or when you need to get, more credentials, maybe.
Totally agree. The final thing I'll say on this, and maybe this will be like the lead in into our influencer conversation another time, is that I don't necessarily believe that anyone is meant to be that big.
That's interesting.
This is my personal point of view, which we will unpack in.
Yes, I like this.
But like, I don't know what would happen to me if I were in that position. So it's the same thing with like, I don't know. We see so much problematic behavior with celebrities, mental health, addiction, suicide, these things that I don't know if anyone is meant to be in that big of a public spotlight, have that much influence, and especially when it happens so quickly. So
right. Don't they say that like a lot of celebrities, they're like, I think of Britney Spears is a perfect example of this. They stay at the age forever that they were when they got famous. You can see, you can see it like Britney Spears. You can see it with like Justin Bieber. I feel like a lot of these people who got famous very young.
And I think that there is like an ability to be in a position of extreme power and extreme influence, but it requires a huge amount of personal work. It requires an incredibly supportive team. And the fact of the matter is, especially with the way that information moves these days, is that people's influence is growing faster than like they can have that, then that can actually happen.
100%.
So y'all stay tuned.
Yes.
Part 2, we'll talk about influencers.
Yep, I have some thoughts about
Brett, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. How can people connect with you?
So you can find me online under Brett Cortell. I also am the co-host of a podcast called Tell Me Something Good. And you could also go to my website, brettcortell.com, which I'm currently revamping, but you can find me there.
Cool. We'll link all that in the notes. And if anyone is finding this video on the internet or perhaps through Brett, hi, I'm Emily. I am a teacher, coach, and business mentor. And you can connect with me on my website, emilynahazel.com. If you're finding this video on my YouTube, that's also a great place to connect with me. If you like this conversation, please like the video, comment, let us know what stood out to you, what your thoughts are. As you can see, we have a lot to say on this conversation, and it really is a conversation. I say this often, but it's not just between Brett and I, it's between us and you. So let's continue that in the comments. And of course, if it was meaningful for you and you know someone who might enjoy this video, we'd so appreciate if you would share it. All right, folks, thank you for hanging out. Thanks for listening, and we will see you all soon. See you on the internet soon.